All right. Well, I think I will get going now. It's good to see some of you here today with us. My name is Jackson Hoteling. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for Missourians for Responsible Transportation, and I'm going to be speaking with you today on behalf of Local Motion's Let's Chat series about what is a walk audit. Something that's one of my favorite things to do in communities, and I'm really excited to be sharing it with you all today. So before I get started, just wanted to share with you a little bit about who is Missourians for Responsible Transportation, what we do. Wanted to talk as well about the resources offered by Missourians for Responsible Transportation and some of our partner organizations across the state. I wanted to share about walk audits and practice, some of the trainings that we do, and then open it up for any additional discussion items that we might have. So getting straight into it, just want to share about Missourians for Responsible Transportation. I know many of you watching will be based in Columbia and might be familiar with Local Motion. They're a Columbia-based bicycle pedestrian advocacy organization. But they're actually one of 4 major organizations that exists across the state of Missouri. So these 4 separate organizations have existed in Columbia, Local Motion, formerly called PedNet. There's one in Kansas City called BikeWalkKC, Ozark Greenways in Springfield, and TrailNet in St. Louis. These 4 groups came together to create what I work for, a statewide partnership called Missourians for Responsible Transportation. They created that in 2018, and our mission is to be the leader in fostering strong communities by aligning advocacy efforts for streets, roads, and trails that work for all Missourians. So our goal is really to work with communities, especially rural communities across the state, helping them to realize their own full potential, working with community champions, other statewide partners to really make things easier for folks to be able to walk, bike, use a wheelchair wherever they need to, anywhere across the state of Missouri. So we work in lots of different kinds of communities, but this is an example of a lot of the reach that we have across the state. Just to give you a little more background information on some of the work that we're doing. But I'm here to talk about walk audits, right? So this is one of the main ways that we'll be able to engage with smaller communities as part of larger projects that we're working on. So before I talk about what that looks like in practice, I just wanted to share a little bit about some of the resources that our partners have. So between those 4 organizations in Kansas City, St. Louis, Springfield, here in Columbia, there's some different kinds of resources. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview background about what's available before I talk about really what a walk audit is and how it might be in practice. So if you're here in Columbia, you can go look on Local Motion's website. They have information about walk audits that are offered, and they will schedule those periodically throughout the year, depending on what kind of projects they're working on. There currently aren't any scheduled right now, but you'll be able to visit this website to learn about them in the future. They also have an app, which I'll be talking about in more detail. So this is something that they're developing to help communities actually identify and see the needs of what a walk audit is. So really just to get to that point right now, a walk audit is a tool that can be really helpful for communities, individuals to see what kinds of infrastructure exists in a community by actually going out and walking the streets, seeing in practice what kinds of sidewalks exist, like what the conditions are, how safe do you feel, what is lacking. It's really something that you want to try to put in a full perspective to identify what the walkability of a community really looks like. So Local Motion has been doing this in part through developing an app, which I have some examples of what they're looking at here. But there's some different categories that this app helps to track. It puts their location of where an incident or sidewalk infrastructure exists. And then with that geolocation, you could kind of see different states of sidewalks, crosswalks, intersections, things like that. So if you're walking on a sidewalk and you see that something is not ADA accessible, then you'd be able to mark that in the app that they have. If you see a bus stop that might have a sign missing or it doesn't have a bench, that's something you'd be able to put in this app. And this actually is a tool that we use, and I'll be talking more about in the rural communities that MRT, Missourians for Responsible Transportation, looks at. When all of those data is input, it will go onto a map like the one I included here for Clinton, Missouri. BikeWalkKC, our partner in Kansas City, also has some resources. They have an entire walk audit document and sheet that you could fill in on your own that they use when they take partners out on walk audits. So they look for 11 primary things. I have a screen capture of two of those things that they'll be looking for. But in the walk audit that BikeWalkKC has identified, they're really trying to focus on, sidewalks, what the street crossings and intersections look like, what driver behavior is, how you feel about safety, how you feel about comfort and neighborhood appearance, some of the surrounding land uses that might exist, lighting, park appearance, and also other kinds of infrastructure for neighborhoods and school, in addition to other things you might notice. So basically, you take this document out, you're walking in a community, and you look at some of those questions and boxes that it has to see what you really notice. You can do a walk audit for a single street or a neighborhood or an entire community, depending on how much time, who is with you. TrailNet also, our St. Louis partners, have some background resources that I wanted to share. They really have a blog post primarily that helps identify what their objectives for the walk audits are. According to TrailNet, our St. Louis partners, their objectives are, for one, to ensure that participants know what's working and what's not safe walking in their neighborhood. Number two, they want to ensure participants can talk confidently about what needs need to be fixed and how to report it. Number three, they want to ensure that participants have identified potential long and short-term projects to improve walkability. Finally, I wanted to share about our Springfield partners, some of the resources that they have. If you go on their website, you can see a safety and education webpage. This has an educational toolbox. It has some tips for basics of bicycling and walking, those kinds of things. So those are some of the resources that exist, but now I'm going to tell you about how a walk audit works in practice. I primarily have worked on walk audits in rural Missouri, but they can work for any kind of community. Really what you want to notice is actually talking to community members, so the people that are using those kinds of sidewalk streets every day. And what we want to do is, look for those areas that they really see people struggling to walk, where it seems the most unsafe, and try to capture that kind of data. What we can do with that data eventually is actually to put it in what we call a walk audit document. Those kinds of documents can be used for grant applications. They can help be good background information documentation for communities that are trying to apply to address different kinds of infrastructure needs. So I'll talk about some specific community examples in a moment, but I wanted to highlight these two photos that I have here. On the left is the city of Windsor, Missouri. In preparation for a walk audit, we actually had a community event, and this walk audit event used this photo as kind of our Facebook advertisement for the event, but very clearly some issues with this sidewalk here. On the right is a photo from Butler, Missouri, which I took back in July. I was talking to community members about some places that might be the most unsafe for walking in their community. And they highlighted this area. It's called West Fort Scott Street, nearing Interstate 49. They said that there's a very narrow crossing with no sidewalks under a railroad bridge, and that's kind of the main crossing that people need to use to get to the shops on the other side from where most of the housing is. So sure enough, I heard their advice, or I heard their discussion about how this was an unsafe area, and there are people that frequently use it. Sure enough, I ended up seeing somebody walking with the shopping bag back to the residential part of the community. So people are regularly having to use these infrastructure. We just want to catalog that and document so we could actually use that to help advocate for the communities, have documentation for grants, those kinds of things that I've shared. I want to talk about like what the process actually looks like when we go in a community. And then you'll be able to see it in practice, because I actually went on a walk audit of my own this morning. So I'll be sharing about that in just a minute. But when we have a community walk audit, we really want to make sure that we do some background work in advance. We want to understand what the goal of a walk audit is. So we don't want to just take people out, take time out of their day without them understanding and without us understanding, like, what do we want to use this information for? Like I said, like often the data that we use, the photos that we have will be really helpful for grant applications, for state and federal grants for infrastructure. So for grants like TAP grants, Transportation Alternative Program grants, that could actually be used to build sidewalks in places where there aren't sidewalks, or fix some of these issues that we've identified here. We also want to make sure that we're working with engaged community groups. Often, having more people is really helpful, because we could split into different groups, cover different areas of a community if we have a one-day event where we're doing a walk audit with a community. Having people that are familiar and know the different areas of town is what we need to be able to go out to these places, actually identify the issues that exist. So in this photo that I'll be sharing, this is also from Butler, Missouri. This is a group of cross-country students, cross-country running. They're very familiar with these areas because they're out running daily for their practices, different areas of town. So they know where the sidewalks are safe. They also know where they have to run in the street because there aren't any sidewalks. So this photo of us walking here, very soon the sidewalk ends. There was sidewalk there at one time, but those trees have damaged it, and there's no sidewalk remaining now. It might have been built 50, 60 years ago and hasn't received any attention since then. So when we do gather a group together, when we do have a specific date, maybe in the evening or afternoon when people are out the most, and available as well to participate in a community event, we want to have an event that actually is fun for folks to come. So we love to bring food and make an engaging kind of discussion, introduction, so everybody's familiar with each other. We want to talk about our goals, like I've said. So everyone is really familiar with what we want to do. And we want to use the documentation tools that we have. So what we like to do is use that We Move app, the app developed by Local Motion, to be able to have everybody go out to different areas and identify the sidewalks, crossings, things like that, that we need. So we'll help them get all set up there, like I said, have some food and have some good opening dialogue so people know what to look for and how to find it. During an actual audit, we'll split into some small groups if we have enough people. Maybe if there's 10 or 20 people, we could split in 2 or 3 groups, go to different neighborhoods and make sure that we get a more holistic understanding of an entire community, if that's what we're documenting, or go in different directions on the same street if it's just one street that we want to identify. We want to make sure we cover areas of town that community members would be familiar with. And through this process, they actually end up seeing things that they walk by every day that they might not have taken into this kind of context. So that's a really special thing about this walk audit process, is that even if people are constantly walking on these same sidewalks every day, talking about the infrastructure, talking about some needs that might exist, allowing people to think about this from an infrastructure perspective, you start noticing these things about your streets that you never would have noticed before, especially if you were driving in a car and aren't actually using these kinds of things in practice. That's really why we do it, so people can engage with their communities. So after we've walked and split into small groups, taken photos, cataloged the sidewalk issues that exist, we'll come back. We'll ask different kinds of questions to spark discussion. You know, like, what was something that really surprised you on these sidewalks? Like, how did you feel about using this street? Like, what safety issues might there have been? Those kinds of things. We really just want to spark spark discussion, spark interest before we actually take that information and then compile it into a document, which I will talk about a little bit later. But like I had suggested a little bit before, I actually went out and did my own walk audit this morning on my walk from my house to here at the office, which is near Boone Library. So I live near downtown Columbia. I walk this area every single day. I do not own a car, so this is the main way that I get around town, is by walking, which is my all-time favorite, or riding a bicycle, or using public transportation. So I did that on my 1 mile walk from my home to the office. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to not have a far commute. But it is something that I was actively seeking, and think it's really important just for the work, of course, that we're involved in, but to be engaged in the community and have something that I could regularly walk. So I'm very familiar with these streets. And even during this audit that I had this morning, I noticed some things that I had never paid attention to before. So I'm just going to go through, talk about some of the positive things and negative things that I've seen in Columbia, and maybe you'll notice some things too. But really that just want to spark discussion and think about what kinds of things we might be finding on our own streets here. So the first thing I really noticed is about a block from my house, actually right down the street. There's some vegetation that's blocking the path. So there are sidewalks that exist throughout most of the route that I took to get to the office. But sometimes there are issues where dirt, debris, or on the photo on the right, bushes kind of come up and actually block the sidewalk. So if you were using a wheelchair, it would not be able to fit in that amount of space. You would have to go in the street. It's important, especially on my street, there is an assisted living facility where there are lots of people that use wheelchairs down these streets. Most of the time they're using the street to take their wheelchair. Even though we're in downtown Columbia, I see it every single day because most of the sidewalks are blocked or have some kind of debris in certain spots, at least within a few blocks of where I live. Some areas will have no sidewalks. Now this street on the other side, there is a sidewalk, but if you go to certain areas that were built, like lots of subdivisions out in the western part of Columbia, you will see this. It was built in a time before the city required any kind of sidewalks to be placed there, and there just won't be sidewalks at all. So this is the case. You can see Dogmaster here. Across this way, there will be a park, land that was purchased by the city for a park. But currently on this side, there are no sidewalks there. Something else we might notice, there's lots of missing crosswalks. Even in place like in the center of downtown where there need to be marked crosswalks, there just aren't. So this is along Ash Street. You also see Ash, the first two photos, and then the right one is Walnut. There are no marked crosswalks here. Truncated domes, which are helpful for ADA considerations, like there are here, do not exist on some of these other corners. So if an individual was sight impaired, they would not necessarily know that that is the entrance to the street. So that's something that really needs to be taken into account. Something that I really do value and appreciate about parts of the City of Columbia's infrastructure are there are some really helpful side paths. I take this one every single day, walking or riding my bicycle. In a place where by the bus station, there's no crossing for cars necessarily. They do make a way so pedestrians can get through. So I really value and appreciate this portion. Of course, parts of it could use a little love. At the end of that that path that I just shared, as you get into Ash again, the fire station, there's a bicycle route marker, but it's very much faded away. And further down on Walnut, there is a district interpretive map, which tells you about lots of different things happening in the community, but that map is pretty sun damaged and could use some love as well. Another thing that I actually saw frequently and see often are sidewalks that just get completely blocked by cars. On the photo on the left, there were some contractors that were working with the Boone County construction going on for their building. I actually saw the people that operated this truck and I was like, hey, like, you're parked in the sidewalk. And then the response that I got, well, like Boone County says I could park here. So, what are you gonna do? You can't have an argument with everybody, but it's just something that you notice is the sidewalk gets blocked. And in the photo on the right, a little bit later, that actually is a legal parking spot for this truck, but it will force you to go on Broadway. It's probably one of the most dangerous parts of Broadway at Providence and Broadway intersection, if you want to get there. So you kind of wonder why you don't necessarily see as many people at the Gateway Plaza, for example, which is right across from that blue truck. It's a pretty inhospitable area, and I will talk a little bit more about that intersection, Providence and Broadway later on. One of the things I did really appreciate about the walk, one of my all-time favorite places in all of Columbia is the plaza that you could find by the Boone County Courthouse and the government buildings around there. It's really incredibly remarkable to see such a beautiful place. I've gone to many events in the amphitheater that exists by the Boone County Courthouse, which is located right here. I've gone to everything from like discussions. There have been protests held there. I've seen a music festival set up there before. I hang out there just on my own, or if I'm talking on the phone or talking with a friend. I really love that area. It's accessible and safe, and you actually see things like this. These are bollards that block cars from entering. And they also have bike racks that make it a really pleasant place to be. I did put this note here, like, why not 9th Street? That's my question that I will continue to ask as I live in Columbia. Why is 9th Street not also a pedestrian plaza? There are so many more people that are walking, riding their bicycles on that street than actually are driving through. So opening that up will do what this does here in a different part of Columbia, and has been done in Lowry Street Mall. Lowry Street on Mizzou's campus used to be a street just like any other. You could see the building here being constructed. In the 70s, I believe, it was actually turned into a pedestrian plaza, and now is one of the big hotspots for the entire campus. So when you do that, you really see and get to experience how many more people are actually using these areas. So that's something that on my walk audit that I really want to pay attention to is like, where do you see people? Why are people here? it's pleasant, that's why people are spending time here. You don't see people hanging out on the Providence and Broadway intersection because it's loud, it's uncomfortable, it's dangerous, and I will talk about that more in a minute. Continuing on my walk, I did share as well, there's a restaurant that actually has some outdoor seating, which is wonderful, but it takes up most of the sidewalk space. So the people that actually need to use that sidewalk have a very minimal amount of space to use it, even though, as you can see here, there's empty parking spaces that would be perfect for restaurant seating to be set up and to have a larger sidewalk in that place. It's hard to pass a wheelchair through a very small area, so that's something that people are probably thinking about every single day. Just across the crosswalk from that area, you'll actually see some hostile infrastructure, mainly for unhoused individuals to prevent them from laying down. They put bars, things like that in the middle. So you'll see these throughout most of the benches that I'm familiar with in Colombia. Near there as well, something you'll notice and something I saw on my walk audit this morning. There are lots of available parking spaces, even though this was about 8:30 in the morning. So right as business is getting started for the day, lots of people out and about. There are entire floors that are empty in this very massive parking garage. And the top 2 floors are completely blocked off. So there's no parking there. It's just something that you notice, that there's lots of available parking here, lots of overbuilt parking space that could be consolidated for other kinds of people-oriented space. One other thing I really try to pay attention to, and something I noticed on my walk audit this morning, is the history of the area and how you can see that, how it comes into play. So I just want to highlight a historical plaque that I found at the base of that major parking garage. I'll just say the first sentence and the last couple sentences here. So this historical plaque says, from the early 1900s to the 1960s, the Sharp End Business District was a city within a city for Colombia's Black community. And then, if you notice at the end, let's see. So this is a rite of passage for people to go, and Sharp End was a destination for visitors and the place for Black adults to work, dine, and socialize. It was demolished during urban renewal, which suddenly and dramatically removed the nucleus of this self-contained Black business community. So we had thriving neighborhoods, we had thriving communities at this time, but the parking infrastructure literally has demolished, taken over, eventually when it was built about 10 years ago, a formerly thriving community. It was kind of one of the most eye-opening things that I've noticed in Colombia. I actually first read this sign on my first day of work moving here about 2 years ago. It's like the biggest juxtaposition that I could find. Demolished thriving community for parking that isn't even fully occupied. I also highlighted another plaque which highlights the same issue in a different parking area that is about half empty in this photo. At the Crunch Fitness parking lot that was Cemetery Hill, which was a historic Black neighborhood that was also demolished over time. So this is the kind of stuff that you might not see when you're driving by, but if you pay attention to what exists, it's really clear to see these kinds of things. Here's one other thing that I really appreciated. The city actually recently installed a pedestrian refuge island, or a mid-block crossing, you might call it, which shortens the time that people need to actually cross from one side of the street to the other. They added these bump outs as well and these signals, so it's very clear that somebody is crossing. And people actually stopped for me this time when I crossed this morning, so I'm grateful for that. adding this makes it so you don't have to walk from here across 5 lanes of traffic. You just have to walk 1 lane, make sure it's safe, and then walk another lane. So that increases safety, and it's something that I really appreciate the city has done recently. But as I've talked about Providence and Broadway before, you'll notice that most of the crosswalks are faded or non-existent at this point. The actual cross button to get across Providence was not working, so I just had to wait. And actually, there was no point that it turned to a walking man. So I just had to wait till it was green for the cars and then just take my chance because it was not functional. You also see lots of car debris from different crashes that have existed. So it's very clear that crashes exist here. It's a fairly common thing as far as I understand, because this is new from when I walked here a few days ago, as far as I remember. So these kinds of things are difficult to stomach when you're walking across a very fast speeding road. And I also, notice this when we go across Providence and Broadway, they have slip lanes, which make it so the cars turning right don't need to stop. So the cars are not yielding to pedestrians. They are continuing, they're looking for the cars. So it's something that you need to be very mindful of when you're crossing these areas. In addition to all of that, driver behavior really trumps a lot of this. The lack of infrastructure facilitates driver behavior to cause issues to pedestrians and bicyclists. It's legal in Missouri to text and drive. At least as far as the law is written, you can't be pulled over if you are texting and driving. So it's something you'll probably see everywhere you go in Missouri. This kind of thing is happening. So these are just an example I took on my walk here. Somebody on the phone, not totally there, only able to operate one arm. And then somebody like actually texting, like taking your eyes off the road. It's a very common thing that you'll see, unfortunately. So I just wanted to, kind of end that discussion of the walk audit. I saw many people riding bicycles. I saw many people out walking. You park your car and then you have to walk to work. So pretty much everybody in Columbia becomes a pedestrian at some point, at least in downtown here, as it goes. So it's just overall, to recap what I've really thought about walking from about 8:20 in the morning to 9 o'clock when I was out taking these photos. You got to stay vigilant at all times. Look behind you, make sure that you're safe, especially when you're crossing the streets here. To contrast that, I actually asked one of my friends who was out on a walk an hour ago in Bologna in Italy. And I just asked her, like, what do you see right now? So within 2 minutes, she texted me back about 1 block of what she saw. And so again, this was taken about an hour ago. She was just walking to meet a friend for lunch. It's a contrast that's kind of hard for me to grapple with sometimes, but look how many people are out. Look how many people are using all different kinds of modes. You see people, elderly folks with canes, they are comfortable and they don't even have to worry about curbs. They don't have to worry about unsafe crossings, because most of the places that people are walking are in completely safe, level areas for people to traverse between, with lots of pedestrian plazas that abut the local businesses, with small parks and green space as well. So again, these photos were taken within a 3-minute span of just when I happened to text my friend and like, hey, like, what do you see right now? There's a contrast, and it's something that I hope that we can work towards. So with that, I just wanted to share a couple quick examples of what this looks like in the communities that we work in here in Missouri. So here's one example, Windsor, Missouri, which I had a photo of before. These are all photos from the walk audit document that I had created for the community with community input and help and support from the Regional Planning Commission. During the hour walk audit, we split into 2 groups. And these are photos that I have taken of some of the people that we saw out walking. We saw the UTVs, we saw lots of children riding bicycles because it was after school had gotten out. We actually saw horse and carriage riding here right next to City Hall, so the very center of town. A horse and carriage will be used. And each of the groups that had split up actually ran into a different mother pushing a stroller with a baby in it in the street. And so we talked to this mother here, and she was able to share a little bit about how she feels, like if she would want to use the sidewalk, those kinds of things. And in Windsor, some of the sidewalks haven't been updated in 80 years or more since they were installed. So that's something that there are lots of challenges, but lots of opportunity as well. Another example here is Clinton, Missouri, one of the communities that we were able to create a walk audit document for. These photos were taken by community members of different states of the sidewalk. You can see them walking in the street here because there isn't a sidewalk, as well as some sidewalks that have gone from times past. Something also we might notice is like here, this is my colleague Ron Bench. We're walking between Dollar General and a grocery store. You could see a dirt path where community members are using every single day to get between these places. So we are definitely not the first people to be walking along this higher speed roadway to get somewhere. We just noticed the path and then followed where it went. I also took a screen capture from Google Maps here. To get to the main hospital for the community, there aren't any sidewalks, and you have to cross an area with no crosswalks and major trucks. So this is a real clear snapshot of a lot of the communities that we're seeing. Major highways or even smaller speed or smaller lane highways with high speeds that cut through towns or go around towns, and that's where a lot of the people end up walking. So with all that information that we capture, as I've said before, we will do our best to document that and try to be clear about incorporating more background research, different community engagement events that we can have, incorporating photos, in order to identify needs and priorities for communities, and also to support documents for planning and for infrastructure grant applications, such as TAP, the Transportation Alternatives Program. These are high-level planning resources, so not like the very detailed like engineering plans that you might need for a community, but they really give a clear snapshot for communities as they set their priorities. Because walk audits are such an experiential learning kind of a thing and very visual, I wanted to share a quick video just about a walk audit. This was conducted about 10 years ago, but with one of our partner coalitions, Missouri Livable Streets, now called Missouri Complete Streets. So this was created in support of University of Missouri Extension. So I'll try playing this right now.
I walk to lose weight. I've lost about 75 pounds walking for about a year on these streets alone. So I walk 2 miles at lunch, and I live out in the country. And so I think the part that I enjoy about walking in town so much is the fact that it is paved and it's during the day. I don't have to take time out for my evening with my kids and my husband. I can just walk during my lunch and just keep me energized and ready for the rest of the day.
Many communities are looking into the existing layout of the roads and sidewalks to determine how easy it is to get around town.
We are splitting up into 3 teams today to go out into the community and experience different areas of town. We are going to use the Safe Routes to School walkability checklist to educate people on what we found during our walkability audit, and in particular, our public officials to be able to demonstrate that this is what we experienced while doing the walkability audit, and just have it as a tool for education.
The Safe Routes to School walkability checklist focuses on identifying the safety, comfort, and convenience needed to easily navigate the community.
I would love to see more sidewalks, easy accessibility all the way down to past the hospital and down into the townhomes where a lot of the children live.
All right. So I think that gave a clear picture about, what it looks like. They used a specific checklist from an organization called the Safe Routes Partnership. And that's a national organization that focuses on different kinds of safe routes. So they focus on safe routes to parks, safe routes to schools, you may have heard of. But creating the checklist, that's something that they're able to provide for communities. So community members, just like we saw there in Unionville, are able to use and kind of look within their own community context. So that is really a lot of the walk audit process. We also incorporate aspects of walk audits into different kinds of trainings that we offer. So this, I think, one of the most important things that MRT does. And when we're offering different trainings, when we're working with our partners to share about important things related to streets, livability, all these things that we're talking about, we really want to hone in and focus on the important aspects about what really does make a community through trainings that we can have great discussions about. So what we really do with these kinds of trainings and incorporating the walk audit piece, so we might call them walkabouts, are trying to use different resources available from the MRT partnership. So from our partners, BikeWalkKC, Kansas City, TrailNet in St. Louis, Ozark Greenways in Springfield, and here with Local Motion in Columbia. And we really just want to try to bring awareness of these kinds of active transportation concepts, especially to the change makers that might be attending our trainings. So we've hosted trainings with members of different communities, different leaders like mayors, other city officials. Missouri Department of Transportation has attended some of our trainings. And I think those kind of individuals, they're actually helping to shape what these streets look like. So having them understand, challenge us on certain things as well is really good for the overall conversation, so we kind of could convey why these things might be important for them. We have other mobile resources available from our partners. And one thing that I wanted to highlight here in the photo is it's called the Home Street Home exhibit. So maybe before we go out on a walkabout, as part of that pre-discussion process, we actually have an interactive display that you can use and we bring to different communities. So you'll be able to kind of see like what streets look like, have different information about the importance of having livable streets in relation to safety, health, the economy, the environment. We also have pop-up traffic calming demonstrations or displays. So going back to this earlier photo that I had, this is one that we set up in September in Springfield, Missouri, with our partners through a grant with the Southwest Missouri Council of Governments here, SIMCOG. We actually created a mini parklet, taking some of the unused parking space in this area that we were working at and turning it actually into a small little park. So we set up a couple tables and chairs. We set up a cornhole event and had mini teeny tiny planters. So it was a very quick thing to set up. but something that we were proud to be able to do to demonstrate that doing an interactive display like this is really helpful. Continuing, just wanted to give a couple of very quick examples of the trainings that we've offered in the past. So here's one that we also hosted in September with some members of MoDOT and other folks that were attending the Missouri Highway Traffic and Safety Conference. We took folks out on the Diverging Diamond Interchange on Stadium, and that goes over Interstate 70. So we brought with us a few tools. We brought with us what you can see with this photo. Taylor March with our partners at TrailNet is wearing vision impairment goggles. So you could kind of see with different kinds of goggles what that experience would be like walking with a certain kind of vision impairment. We also brought a wheelchair with us. And our colleague with TrailNet, Charles Bryson, was using the wheelchair to get to where we are all going to convene to talk about the Diverging Diamond Interchange. It actually took him about 30 minutes longer to make that walk over to where we were meeting in Cosmo Park. We walked from the hotel where the conference was hosted. We walked across the Diverging Diamond, and then the sidewalk ends here. And then you have to cross over a roadway to get to Cosmo Park. But he was trying to use it with his wheelchair, and it simply can't work. Walking back, I took this photo of us between literally 10 lanes of traffic as we were walking back to the hotel. Some might say that this is too many lanes for the amount of traffic that exists. And it so happens that this is actually one of the highest areas for crashes in the city of Columbia. So these are important reasons why we've chosen this location and why we want to identify certain things that for the future, when we're building infrastructure projects, we could try to address. As I've shared with the training that we had in Springfield, this was set up in September. We want to identify different ways to improve policy in the southwestern part of the state. So we hosted this training in a CID, or Community Improvement District, within Springfield, Missouri. Much like the district operates in Columbia, the Commercial Street Historic District in Springfield has different kinds of complete streets elements that they will use to make it attractive for people to visit their areas. So I'm really impressed with what Commercial Street has to offer, and that's what we wanted to showcase with the training. We took folks on to see some of the plazas that they have, something that I think kind of looks like Alley A here, but they do have more open space, more plazas than we might find in downtown Columbia. They also, as part of this training, we took them outside of the boundaries of the Community Improvement District, across the railroad tracks to the just north of the railroad tracks, where there basically weren't any sidewalks of any kind. So we were able to see that juxtaposition of like where the wealth is concentrated, they're getting certain kinds of improvements. Where people are left out, they are not receiving these same complete streets elements, so it might be a less safe area for pedestrians. So these are all the kinds of things that we're wanting to incorporate into the walk audits that we do here in throughout the state of Missouri. So I just wanted to thank everybody for attending today. And here's my information if anyone wants to get in touch. But I would like to open it up for questions or discussion if anybody has anything to share. All right, well, thank you, everybody.